Worship leader, you're called to more than just a platform. Hey guys, exciting news. Worship Team Training is now on Substack. And when you subscribe as a member, you'll get coaching that's personal, content that hits you right where you serve, and courses that build confidence and to help prevent burnout. Subscribe for free, or for a few dollars a month, you can receive weekly leadership devotionals, behind-the-scenes worship insights, access to live mentoring, exclusive video and podcast content, plus free sessions for one-on-one coaching, mentoring by yours truly. Think of it as your weekly worship leader check-in to grow deeper and lead stronger and feel less alone. Start your membership today by going to worshipteamtraining.substack.com. Now let's climb inside today's episode. Hope you enjoy.
If there is a worry about the way that commercialized worship music has obscured or narrowed what worship is, I do think for younger people who their first encounter with like emotionally engaging worship music is in the context of like a passion conference or something like that, or through an album that's billed as sort of a live worship experience, that can define for people what they think worship is. And if I'm not getting that, I'm not actually worshiping like to whatever degree I'm supposed to be. It almost adds this like, an achievement oriented, like you're supposed to achieve a certain level of emotional high or achieve a certain level of feeling of devotion. And then, you've really worshiped. I do think there is some, for sort of talking about honesty, being able to recognize what worship is, I do think there is a sense that that's been obscured. And I think it's been obscured toward kind of hype songs, anthems, in ways that have pushed out more contemplative style of worship or lament, in ways that it's hard, I think, for worship leaders to envision a worship set that includes lament, right? Like, how do I get from my opening hype song to lament and then to like the bumper video before the sermon and have that not feel weird?
Hey, worship teams. Welcome to the Worship Team Training Podcast with Brandon Dempsey. Here are your hosts, Tony Guerrero, Taraya Bissonette, Rich Kirkpatrick, and Brandon Dempsey. Worship Team Training provides live workshops and online resources to help inspire, create, and transform the leading of worship. Let's jump into today's topic. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, worship teams, welcome back to the Worship Team Training Podcast. We're here to help worship leaders like you grow spiritually, musically, and relationally, and your teams. We have with us today our co-host. Well, Tony is out. I was going to introduce him, but he's in an invisible room over here that you see. But we have Taraya Bissonette. What's going on? How are you?
Doing great. Doing absolutely awesome. Glad to be back.
Amazing. It's great to have you back. And Rich, my buddy, what's going on? Rich Kirkpatrick, how are you?
I'm doing good. I am recovering from being attacked by a mother turkey who's protecting her chicks. So here in the Bay Area, there are lots of wild turkeys. I don't know what to say about it. Taking a phone and my rib is cracked. Anyway, but I'm great otherwise.
Awesome. Good to have you. And importantly, we are honored to have our guest, worship scholar and storyteller, Kelsey Kramer McGinnis, or Dr. Kramer McGinnis. What's going on, Kelsey? How are you?
Hello. Thanks so much for having me. Can we just make the show about the wild turkey? Because I would really like to hear in detail more about this story.
Astonished and confused at the same time. Rich, what is up with the turkey anyway? What happened to you? Or the turkey?
Well, there's wild turkeys and there's a bunch of little chicks that just got hatched. And so I had to take a video of it because it's been in our little neighborhood, right? And so I was walking my dog. My dog got a little excited and the turkey turned and, wings went up. And then she just charged the dog. The dog flew me backwards. This old man tumbling on the street. I got on video. At least you could see the camera going like this. It's fun.
No.
But
That's
embarrassed.
horrible.
I'm embarrassed, but also the chicks were cool. And don't mess with the mama.
Nope.
Is Winston okay?
Winston? Sherlock. Sherlock is fine.
Okay.
Oh my God.
There's Watson. Watson was my former dog. Now it's Sherlock.
Oh, those are good dog names.
But Sherlock is good. So is the turkey okay, or did you go after that too?
Oh, she's going to survive the fittest every day.
She's doing just fine. She's doing just fine.
And her chicks are all going to survive. They got a great percentage chance, I think.
What an amazing segue to Kelsey's new book.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there are a lot of turkey parents out there.
Let's make that turn right now.
Yes. So, you've heard people say, let's kind of come away from the feathers and go ahead and get into the room, away from the turkey, that we're all safe. So that's good. So if you heard somebody say worship music is too emotional, or production, or whatever, it feels like a concert, not like a church, you're not alone. So in this episode today, we explore the rise of the worship experience and ask, are we being emotionally manipulated in worship? Or is the emotional connection that we feel something God actually designed? So with us again, as introduced, Kelsey McGinnis. She is a writer for Christianity Today. Also, a new book coming that she is co-authoring is called Myth of Good Christian Parenting. So be on the lookout. We are going to get social links from Kelsey where you can find her and to sign up to receive the book and get on a list. So anyway, without further ado, Kelsey, great to have you today. How are you?
Doing good. Yeah. It's book comes out in October. So we're in the throes of doing all of the things that come before that, which I've never done before. This is the first time I have written a book. My co-author has written several. So she is guiding me through the process. I'm very fortunate to have that be like my first introduction to book writing world. And it's been great. So doing that, our semester here, I teach at a small liberal arts college in Iowa. That starts next week. So I'm kind of preparing syllabi for that. I'm teaching a class in our theology department called Death and Dying. I've never taught that class before, so that will be a new one and an interesting one for me. I sometimes get tapped to teach worship and the arts, or kind of classes in our theology department like that. So this is not technically a music related one, but there will be a lot of music involved. But my syllabus is done, and we're just kind of getting everything we can done before classes start.
Amazing. So take us through this. You wrote a piece, The Rise of the Worship Experience. You talked about that, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned this around the mid-2000s, we started seeing worship music marketed as an experience. And we've seen that at churches everywhere. What changed in how worship music was presented and consumed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mark 2000, 2001 as this moment where the music industry itself starts to recognize worship music as a commercial genre. So my worship scholar friends will be quick to point out worship music absolutely predates this Matt Redman kind of wave of British invasion worship music. That's not the first time anyone's talking about worship music, right? That's been around. Contemporary music for congregational use predates that. But around 2000, there are a couple of different ways that we can mark this. I like to point to the introduction. Do you remember the WOW compilations? WOW Christian music? Yeah.
Yeah.
So during those years, you start to see WOW worship. So you have this breaking out of worship music from Christian music more broadly, which signals a couple of things. It means that there's an audience for worship music specifically, aside from CCM, which is more sort of pop-styled worship or pop-styled Christian music. So as that happens in the early 2000s and worship music becomes its own commercial genre, you also start to see other parts of commercial worship music, like touring, start to take off. And worship, the word experience, is often tied to live albums. And Monique Ingalls has written quite a bit about this. She's another scholar at Baylor. And that term experience highlights something important about what people are looking for when they listen to worship music or go to a worship music concert. There is this sense there that there's something more than entertainment happening, that there's some spiritual experience or encounter that is happening through this music. And that becomes not only a marketing term, but also a way people describe their own relationship with this music. Again, not entirely new, but new in terms of it being commercialized.
You're listening to the Worship Team Training Podcast. Be sure to follow us on our socials: Facebook, Threads, YouTube, Blue Sky, Instagram, Substack, and X. Also, please click the subscribe button from where you're listening to this podcast and receive all the new shows and downloads when they drop. Thanks again for following and listening to the Worship Team Training Podcast. Now back to our episode.
So this kind of creates a problem, though, doesn't it, for teams who lead weekly? What's the difference between creating an experience and leading a sacred moment?
Yeah, I think that's just become this really important question for people who are doing this weekly, right? It's just a different thing to be leading a service in a local community where there is music being used versus what you find at a conference or a live arena concert. These are two different things. And increasingly, as you have, especially like youth going to these conferences and these worship experiences, you start having this, this disconnect between this emotional high I feel at these experiences and what I'm experiencing at my local church on Sunday. Is that good? Is that bad? Is it something wrong with me? Is it something wrong with my church? Is it something wrong with the music? What's happening that I'm not having this strong emotional response all the time? I think for a lot of people, that is a little bit concerning. It feels like there's something missing when I don't have that emotional high. So I think people start thinking differently about what music is supposed to do for them in the context of corporate worship on a Sunday morning. And I think we're still dealing with that. I don't think that there's been like an end of that conversation.
So,
wow.
Some people want to push back, though, on the emotional side of worship because we've heard this before. Well, is that manipulative? But is emotional expression really at odds with truth? And what do you think people are really afraid of?
Yeah, I've written quite a bit about this. And the answer to, is it manipulative? I mean, the answer is yes, in a way. Unless you mean manipulative in like a deceptive way. But
what makes it manipulative also, if you can build that in?
Yeah. The use of music itself is meant to engage your emotions, right? Like if we were wanting to avoid any intrusion of emotions into worship, we wouldn't use music. The whole point of marrying music and words is to engage the heart, to engage the emotions. And I think the concern is, to what end is my emotion being moved or engaged here? I think one piece I wrote a couple of years ago was, worship music is emotionally manipulative, but do you trust the worship leader who's pulling the strings? And that question, I think, helps differentiate between this concern about music is moving me, I'm worried about that, versus someone is putting music in front of me and they're trying to make me feel something. Do I trust the person who's trying to do that emotional guidance? That's a different question. Because the use of music in liturgy has always been to inspire, to bring in the emotions, to inspire awe. I mean, you think about like the use of polyphony in cathedrals during the medieval period or the Renaissance. That is meant to inspire awe, to make people feel something. And that's okay. I think that's not new. And I think that's something that we have made peace with. It's the point of music. It's the point of putting up beautiful art in a cathedral. So I think the question is more, why am I nervous about this?
Hey there, worship leaders, feeling stuck in a musical rut? Is your team struggling with unity or commitment? Let's talk about leveling up your worship team. Imagine a tailor-made workshop that comes right to your church, designed to revitalize your team's skills and spiritual formation. It's budget-friendly and could be the game changer you've been looking for. Go to www.worshipteamtraining.com/workshops. Get 20% off when you inquire today.
I'm sorry to hear about your turkey experience, but it gives us something else to joke about.
That is just awful.
I don't know.
And you felt
There's
they
no way
pushed
to-
you down. I
I've
mean,
never
you
heard
just
that before.
it caught you so off guard. You just fell over.
It's the story of my life.
I mean, that would have been me. I don't think
it's how every ministry I've been a part of has gone. It's a metaphor.
Oh my gosh.
My memoirs will
That's
be covered with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's good, man.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I've got a
it's okay.
3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old down there that are doing pretty well. But
we've been there.
It's amazing.
Been there. Got the T-shirt and the barf all over that T-shirt too. So,
my mom would just point to her paddle on the kitchen wall.
Oh,
and that was it.
Ooh,
It was
there's the parenting right there. There it is, Kelsey. You're gonna lay in the rich now. All right.
Yeah.
Fundamentalist background. I can tell you stories.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Oh man.
tear you up before we build you up.
I feel like I feel like we brought, we have ramped up this conversation. We've talked about emotions so far. We're going to be jumping into a deeper dive into what you call, Kelsey, worship-tainment. But Sharia and Rich, I want to turn you guys loose. You go ahead and hammer away at Kelsey. Sharia, you go first.
I'm not going to hammer at all at Kelsey. I'm not going to hammer. This is definitely, it's a modern question. It is something that has ramped itself in. And because I am, as I always say, old enough to have babysat Moses, I saw when everything began and where it changed. And I'm going to say what I always say, follow the money. It's always about things change, things define, and culture begins to be influenced greatly by the people behind the scenes monetizing and producing whatever they find is going to be a moneymaker. I know that sounds horrible, but it's the truth. And Kelsey, you're absolutely right. At about the time when that wow stuff began, they began to see a real interest. And I'm not sure that the motives of getting worship music out there was altogether altruistic. What I think ended up happening is large companies who were secular companies began to jump on and control the distribution. And you see large churches now, they're producing their own music and they're building these distribution, this music business 101, and finding ways for people to make $1 or $2. Now that's neither no rhyme or reason, no judgment, no anything. It's just a fact. So when I approach this question of manipulation, first of all, I would like all of us to work really hard and rephrase that, to find a different word for that. Because as an artist and studying art, the true artistry of that you mentioned are ancients, are people that brought before there was social media and TV and all this, people like walked to the church and saw the beautiful expression of the artists that were commissioned to create something based on their own trial and struggle. And any artist that's listening to this, whether it's music, sculpture, painting, whatever, you know that actual art is not, you don't take the reward for yourself, because the trial and the trauma that you go through in creating that art, putting God first and creating that art, there's a lot of lessons that go to that. So I feel like in the olden days, before, the Michelangelo days, all of these days where the architecture was meant for the common person, I'm just using the vernacular for way back when, was to look at something awe-inspiring, as Kelsey said. That's what it needed to be back then. But I think our question needs to be, what are we doing? What are we doing? Worship is a personal experience between God and us. It's the personal time that your husband, your spouse, you go out to dinner, you talk, you have a good conversation. It's the conversation between children and parent. It's a time to cultivate a moment where the person leading should get no reward for that. There should be no, wow, this was a great, I'm hoping to do music that doesn't distract anybody. I'm hoping to do enough, but I'm not saying we're able to accomplish this. I'm just saying by recalibration of what our brains should focus on, worship on the weekly is meant for the family to come together, to focus wholly and thoroughly on who God is, on the greatness of his adoration of who he is. Not, I can only worship with this song and this song done exactly the way that I hear it on music or at these concerts and at these festivals. I think we need to create different genres. I think we need to have corporate adoration worship be different than these worship experiences. In fact, I would prefer not even to call it worship experiences. So here I go, sticking my neck out. I would prefer that they were Christian themed concerts, that they were Christian music is it's a machine. It's doing its
thing. Can we get away with even not calling it worship?
Well, this is just my
That'd be interesting.
Okay, this is just my thing. Okay, are you doing it's Christian themed? Am I dressing up for the day? Do I find in the Bible anywhere where the lights have to be perfect and I've got a stage manager calling the experience? I mean, I grew up in theater. I have produced thousands of shows and produced these things out in the world. I have been a part of that. I'm okay with that. If that's where it goes, that's where it goes. But I just want to pose the question. As you guys know, my my life's mission or my life's mission statement is to cause reasonable doubt on the side of God. So here's my question, counselor. Here's my question, judge. Is it possible now that we have matured to this place where people are spending dollar to go find great musicians, great singers, great, amazing performers whose music is good message music, all about Jesus, talking about his goodness, talking about his greatness? Do we utilize those same songs in a worship format when we are utilizing the words of that song, the language of that music to convey our adoration to God? Sure. But I think where it gets a little messy is now we're trying to put, new wine in an old wineskin. Leave the biblical actuality of worship. Let's not try to define modern things with ancient sayings. Let's try to be creative ourselves. Come up with something. Are you going to spend, $40 to see and hear the amazing show? I've had so many friends see that. Absolutely. Absolutely. But did I go to see play those songs and sing those songs? And did those songs and me looking at him produce an experience in me that I might have had at my, church with Johnny Joe on the guitar? Maybe. But I'm going to go see because he's a great singer. It's produced. They've got these great concerts. It's reminding me that you can be in the world and not of it, and nobody's going to throw a tomato at you because you said the name of Jesus and this big thing. You've got outfits, you got rock and roll skinny pants, you've got the guitar going to town, you got all the things going on, and then maybe that's separate. I'm just asking the question. Then it's separate. Could I worship at the thing? Sure. But am I looking at Jesus or am I looking at the rock and roll skinny pants? I'm just asking the question.
Kelsey, can we separate it?
I mean, I think you can. I don't think you have to. I think there's a lot of things to that, I would say. One, I do think it is very easy to underappreciate how very modern our idea of what it means to be an artist is in the context of sacred art. Prior to the 19th century, most musicians and artists working for the church were truly vocational artists. Like, they did not see their work as an expression of themselves in a meaningful way. Some did, but primarily they went to work for the church because that was the place you could make a living being an artist. It was a place you could get training as a musician. It was a place you could make a living. Mozart very famously had to work in the church. He had to work at the cathedral at Salzburg and write masses, even though he hated it because opera was just not, was too unpredictable. He couldn't make a standard, he couldn't make a stable living doing that. So the 19th century brings us this romantic artist where there's this idea that the art someone creates is this like outpouring of themselves, their soul, the soul of the artist. That's where we get this romantic idea. And that very much influences the way we think about Christian artists now. It's why we take so seriously the personal devotional lives and morality of Christian artists. And I think it's also why we have so much discomfort with some of these questions, because we don't see these people as simply making art for the church for a variety of purposes. We have kind of collapsed some of the ways we see this, and entertainment media has changed some of this conversation as well. But I do think art for the church is just incredibly expansive, and the different ways it draws people toward the divine are all fine and different and good. In fact, Handel's Hallelujah Chorus is not a worship song. It's part of an oratorio. It's a performance genre based on opera. People weren't gathering in a cathedral to sing that together. They were gathering to hear it as part of a dramatic presentation of a musical work that was not in any way participatory. But I think a lot of us would say, oh, that's this worshipful choral piece, So I don't necessarily know that I want to gatekeep too much around the term worship. I do understand why you might want to change the semantics around terms like experience or manipulation. There are these terms that we use that don't have necessarily stable meanings, or maybe come to mean something that we don't like. I think performance is another term that the church has a really hard time with. What does that mean to be a performer in the church? Do we want to use that word? Do we want to talk about virtuosity? So I think to some degree, being careful about terms is really helpful. But I wrote a piece about Christians having kind of worshipful experiences at Taylor Swift concerts a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And that got some backlash because people were okay, let's not go there, please. And, I don't really have a strong opinion either way, but I'm also not interested in pushing back on someone who has a worshipful experience at the Taylor Swift concert. I want to say, I believe that's possible in good faith. Even though it's certainly not universal, even though it's certainly not what's happening for everyone. Are there people who are literally not literally, but worshiping Taylor Swift more than they're having some kind of a communal encounter? Sure. I'm sure that is happening, but it can be multiple things can be happening at once.
I just wanted to just reply. I mean, I think, my number one, everything has the train has left the station. And once again, I just want to go back to be clear. When I raised my kids, I told them it was okay if they lied. And here's why, because I always wanted them not go ahead and lie about everything. What I was saying is, if you lie and you tell me the truth, I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not going to be mad at you because I need to ask you a question. The fundamental question is, why? Why did you lie? I want to build a relationship with you and find out the reason why. And I feel like the most important thing maybe right now is, I won't put the heavy on anybody. I've got friends who do all of the things that we just talked about. I just want you to know the difference between calling it one thing and calling it another. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is a vast cavern of misuse of words and terminology. And it's the adoption of, well, this is what it meant long ago, and we're adopting. It's time for us to be clear about the definition of all these different things, because they're going to be going. And sometimes it's like we get caught in the semantics or needless entanglements. We've been having this discussion for 30 years, back in the pews versus chairs era. I mean, this conversation is not new. But what is new is what you said, Kelsey, and that's the expansive art for church. Nobody is saying not to do art for church. My only thing was the same way that I talk to my kids. I want you to know the difference between when you're really worshiping God, wherever that is. Do you know what that is? And are you having an actual real experience, or are you being fed other things that exist here as opposed to here, and you're calling that worship? Because for me, that's the biggest responsibility. I don't want someday for, anybody to think, oh, I was doing a great job. You go to heaven. And it's like, I knew you not. Because what you were doing is you were presenting an experience or a song, and ignorantly or not knowing or maybe knowing because you wanted to make money, you called it this as opposed to calling it for what it is. And I feel like our Heavenly Father is the kind of Father who says, I just want you to know the difference. I want you to know the difference. I want you to dig deeper. If this is a passion of yours, dig deeper. The same way that I said to my kids, I'm not going to be mad at you. I understand there's lots of reasons for not telling the truth. But the most important thing is that you knew you lied because that's what you're going to carry for the rest of your life. Most important thing is you know what a real experience with Jesus is, no matter what.
See, I don't think people really know what a real experience with Jesus is. I think it's Richard Rohr who says if we want a religious experience is something that completely changes you. And so if we show up on Sunday and have a truly religious experience with Jesus, it's going to be so awe that it's awful, because where that word comes from. And I think a lot of times there's an issue with emotions, and this if we can go back there for a moment, I think it's certain emotions that we've highlighted that artists, we want you to do certain emotions. Laments was really bad during a period. Having been in this for a long time, nobody wanted happy, clappy songs, Rich, because this brings people in the door. And I would talk with my pastor. I said, can we do something about confession? Do you see how many people come into my office the last month who are dealing with A, B, C, D, E that we don't want to talk about in public? But this is our church. We need to sing together to lament these mistakes we're making as a whole people. We're failing each other. We're failing marriages. We're failing our character. And our music, what you just said, Jaria, is part of the problem is we have, let's put out this emotion, but here's our reality. Our reality as a country is we haven't repented from our collective mistakes. So our music has to be positive about our own personal escape, because that makes more sense and it's easier to do that in a general setting, as opposed to saying as a collective people, we should be mourning about the mistakes we've made for hundreds of years or even this past decade and looking at that. So as artists, going back to what an artist is, creative researchers talk a lot about, there is a definition that they use for creativity. Something, has some novelty to it and something has some usefulness to it. And then some would add a third category that I add, it has some kind of mystery to it too that you can't explain. And I don't think us as Christians really understand all that art can do beyond the personality to bring in people. And I think one thing I'm hoping to do with this season of life is just ask those questions. So I'm curious about how do we then, this disconnect between certain emotions we're allowed. Does that make sense? Am I on to anything there, or do I miss it here, Kelsey?
Feeling stuck or overwhelmed as a worship leader? Worship Team Training's mentoring program offers expert guidance tailored to your needs, from developing your leadership as it relates to your ministry, your worship team, and your personal development. This program fits your schedule and budget, helping you grow in worship, leadership, and spiritual depth. Transform your worship ministry with confidence. Check out the mentoring program today at www.worshipteamtraining.com/mentoring. Sign up today.
Yeah, I think I do. When I talk to worship leaders, I do sense that there is some hunger for a broadening of the kinds of emotions that are welcome in the context of musical worship. And I think that's been the case for a couple of years now. I remember talking to some leaders a couple of years ago about lament and the ways that they're trying to do that, and the sort of the practical struggle of fitting that into a short service, which I think are really fascinating. I think are underappreciated, some of the logistical concerns there. And I do, if there is a worry about the way that commercialized worship music has obscured or narrowed what worship is, I do think for younger people who their first encounter with like emotionally engaging worship music is in the context of like a passion conference or something like that, or through an album that's billed as sort of a live worship experience, that can define for people what they think worship is. And if I'm not getting that, I'm not actually worshiping like to whatever degree I'm supposed to be. It almost adds this like it almost adds like an achievement oriented, like you're supposed to achieve a certain level of emotional high or achieve a certain level of feeling of devotion. And then, you've really worshiped. I do think there is some, if we're sort of talking about honesty, being able to recognize what worship is, I do think there is a sense that that's been obscured. And I think it's been obscured toward kind of hype songs, anthems, in ways that have pushed out more contemplative style of worship or lament, in ways that it's hard, I think, for worship leaders to envision a worship set that includes lament, right? Like, how do I get from my opening hype song to lament and then to like the bumper video before the sermon and have that not feel weird? Like there's real concern that we've built these service models around this style of music that doesn't have room for it. And I think that's a real problem.
It seems to me like the idea of utility. We talk about what worship should do, but not a lot about what worship is.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my professors, he said, if worship is everything, then it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would laugh every time he said that. He'd kind of tap me on the shoulder. We'd have these conversations or whatever back in the day. But I don't think things have changed with that. But look, what can it do for this service? What does that song do? It's not a matter of the tradition of you have the fourfolds, the movement of worship, where you can say we have a point where we have the presence of Christ at the table, or we have a point where we send people out. That was ridiculed during the whole seeker-sensitive movement, which I unfortunately was in. No, you're not allowed to do that. It's all about marketing, Rich. It's all about, I won't say names, but it's all about the conferences I would go to, and they say, here's how you do it. And basically, I would see on the screen a sales funnel. Here I'm an artist, and I'm being taught a sales funnel, how to write my music and put it in. And I just wonder, how do we help people articulate the need for that authenticity as artists? How can we, use whatever platform we have to mature this conversation to what Shariah is saying, where we're not just like throwing these things against the wall?
That's such a good question. Such a good question. Oh man, I do think that I've been turning over a piece in my mind that I want to write about the value of songwriting in the local church, a kind of musical development that is hyper local to a community. Because when we're talking about what worship can do, that way of thinking about it, you sort of that sets worship leaders on this path toward, okay, I need a song that does this, and I'm going to go find the song that does that. And you go and find the popular songs that are easy to find. There's a whole system that's set up for you to find certain music easily. Whereas if you have people who are writing songs toward the needs of and musical style of your community and the musicians you have, maybe this is naive because I am not a seasoned songwriter, but maybe it's naive to think this, but I would think that the shape of the music produced from that process would reflect the community and also provide the kind of music that the community will benefit from.
Amen.
Is that naive? You have more experience in this than I do.
Yes.
Amen.
I don't
This
think
is
that.
it. Please.
I don't think that's naive at all. In fact, I think that that's putting the innocence and the vulnerability and the struggle, the good struggle, the private care, the pay attention to your people. We're supposed to equip the saints. We're supposed to be good stewards of the people that we have. I think you should write that piece today. I mean, I think that definitely, because that's a piece. And you know what? It's been something that's been spoken about for so long and not really grabbed on, because quite frankly, that's hard to do.
It's hard.
And quite frankly, there's not in a local church, people who have those abilities or whatever. And the people who do have the abilities either don't want to be any part of that or have been, kicked out or whatever. They don't feel like they have a place, but it's definitely a piece of this new puzzle that for whatever reason needs to be talked about.
There's a data point that I asked my friends at CCLI because they know they have all this information. And I used to, way back in the day, the founders of it, I knew one of the co-founders, and he always gave me this data about worship leaders. And I was nerdy like that. Well, I asked him this months ago. So what is the one data point that of most concern that I should hear that I should be involved in. He says, well, musical skill is at an all-time low and declining
Yeah.
in professional Christian worship pastors, volunteers, etc. It's just going down. So, and of course, I know this to be true, and being a person who serves in a local church, that's the case, because they think I'm great. And then back in my day, I'm like, I was okay, but now, which is so funny to me that that's true. But so how do we help? We have this one thing with language. It's so hard. You want to help the parishioner understand, here's my expectation with worship. It could be more than just my one last experience at Passion or summer camps last night or the mountaintop, which is a whole kind of revivalism thing, I think. But how can we help also the skill level? What things can we do? Is there a way that's being addressed? Because I'd like to help.
Yeah. That's a question that a lot of folks are asking right now. And because I do think over the past 20 years, as the guy with guitar, kind of rock star worship leader model has really caught on, you want like one guy who can play guitar and perform well. And it kind of doesn't matter if he has a music degree, right? Like there's been an increase in the hiring of worship pastors, worship leaders that don't have formal musical training, which I don't think that has to be a bad thing, but think about the kind of skills that you have when you have to go through music training, like arranging, transposing, writing a part for the random flute player that you have that wants to play on a Sunday morning, right? Like when you have someone in charge who has a really limited set of musical skills, that limits opportunities for other musicians in the church. That limits opportunities for a choir. He can't write out choral parts. He can't arrange. He has a hard time understanding. He has a hard time explaining to other musicians what he wants. And I think that's a real challenge. I mean, that's a problem that we're like a generation out from addressing too, right? Like that takes like massive cultural shift. I do think among younger people, there is an interest in gaining musical skills. People are so interested in DIY music. People are so interested in how to make something that sounds good. And there are more tech tools available to help them do that, which I think is a good thing and a bad thing, because in some ways you don't have to learn to read music to make a song in your bedroom. So I don't know what that looks like. I do think that mentorship in the church is a big deal. Every guy I knew in youth group who learned to play guitar learned from a mentor in the church. They weren't great, but that's how they learned. That's how they learned how to do some basic stuff. The church has historically been a place where people can learn. But again, if you've got someone in charge who has really limited musical skills, then that's a problem. So I think if we're going to see a sea change there, that's going to need to happen like in hiring processes. You're going to need to see churches start to care more.
Yeah. And I think also in establishing what are our levels of excellence, what you've got to establish that in your department, because maybe there's a person who doesn't know how to do that, but it's okay for you to hire out. It's okay for you to get like the local choir person from the local university to come in and teach a couple of classes. It's okay for you to take the music studios that are, please, thank you, Jesus, to come in. But because we haven't established that on a whole, maybe, churches have, but we haven't really established. What we've actually established is that it's okay to be a cheater, pumpkin eater musically and get tracks so that we can still sound good, but we don't have to put in the time. Because we can't put in the time, which that's once again, no judgment. But we've disabled people from looking at the importance of actually being good at something. I mean, people who are well read, people who are well studied in anything. And, Kelsey, you got your doctorate for goodness sakes. You're well read, you're well studied in your particular genre and the way that you go. It has afforded you well. It has, set you up to be in several different arenas because it was established for you as something that was a level of excellence. And I would like for just people, whoever's listening, make a list of the top 3 things that are important for you, hire out, keep that in your mind. Unfortunately, everybody has to be, corporate minded now. So even if you don't have musical training, now you gotta hire this and do this and make sure that this is, and maybe that's the simplest question. What are the top 3 things that we want to shoot for in excellence, just skills development and then
Well,
scripturally.
let's do that.
Just a question.
Well, let's do that right now. You guys had so like a mind-blowing things to say, Rich. I'm using the title of your book also. And, you know, I really feel we've done a lot of disservice to our teams in terms of technology and everything that's being used. I know Tony was here. He would have a mouthful to say about that. And, you know, the one thing I keep coming back to is creativity and vulnerability. We don't mind embracing the creativity, but vulnerability is something that is almost hands off. And I believe that's why people walk away with this was too emotional for me. Because deep down, people have a difficult time of being vulnerable, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what are we doing to minister to it? And the three things in our time to wrap up, Kelsey, what are three things that you see that, number one, is going to be something that is critical for worship leaders, critical for the church, and then just for the worshiper?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. Number one, in terms of, oh man.
Like, what's the one thing you want worship leaders to walk away with, and the church and the worshiper?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
I know.
I find
like if you
myself
have one wish, three wishes.
I find myself coming more and more back to, I think it's going to become, I think it already is so important to embrace a hyper local practice, meaning your song selection, the way you do church, the way you choose musicians, the way you program your service with an eye toward the individuals in your congregation and the musicians who want to serve in that congregation. The wheels are greased toward trying to achieve a level of production that is modeled on something that is commercial. And that's something that serves an audience and a market and fandom. It's not necessarily something that serves the church. It's not necessarily going to be bad, but I think the more you can think about music as this participatory thing that your church does together that should reflect the identity of your community in all its quirkiness and eclecticism, you know, in all of the ways that like someone who's trying to program a national conference might find a little awkward or maybe not quite polished enough. I think embracing those things is really important. And I would have not said that 15 years ago. Like as a college student leading worship for Campus Crusade for Christ at a regional conference, I would have been all about, but I think more recently, as I've talked to worship leaders and seen the downstream effects of a focus on production based on a model that isn't your church, I think the downstream impacts of that are not great. And I think also lead to people feeling really alienated from what's happening musically in their church, when music can be a way to cultivate an incredible sense of belonging. Music can do a lot of different things for a community. It facilitates worship. Of course, we can kind of say it's all about God, but it is also all about the community when it's done well. It is communal, it is participatory, it is worshipful, it is both horizontal and vertical. It's all of those things. And it can be all those things at once when it's done well.
Love it. Kelsey, it's been a rich time having you here, and just to hear your spirit for worship and for congregations and churches. And love to have you back to speak more into other topics. Can you tell our listeners and viewers, where can people find you and also your book that's coming?
Yeah, you can find my work at Christianity Today. I have monthly articles that come out there, monthly artist profiles as well. I have a Substack. If you search my name on Substack, you'll find me there. I'm also on social media, as most writers are. The book, The Myth of Good Christian Parenting, comes out in October, which in a lot of ways is a strange first book for me, but I'm really excited about it. And yeah, you can find me all those places. And thanks so much for having me. It really is an honor to get to talk with people who are so experienced and have so much wisdom about these things because I think they are complicated and important.
Well, Kelsey, we really appreciate having you here and just sharing your insight and all that God has breathed into you. So thank you for that today.
Thank you so much.
So worship leaders, here's the challenge. Do not be afraid of being vulnerable, and do not be afraid to minister, coming in touch with your own emotions, because the question isn't, is worship too emotional, but rather, is the moment rooted in Christ? And is it something that the room really connects with, and we're really reaching our community through love and acceptance and empathy, and not the track and not the polish and not the lights or anything else? And I know we talk a lot about that, but there is room to expand these conversations because they're real. And the downstream effect, like what you talked about, Kelsey, is so real and so true. So we hope that today you enjoyed this podcast. We asked, I didn't say this before, but hit the subscribe button so that you get every download of the episode when they drop. But also, please share this out with a friend, because there are so many worship leaders that need to hear this message, those in your team, those in your church that may just want to understand, hey, what does worship really mean anyway? So Kelsey is a perfect resource for them and to hear what we talked about today. So thanks for joining us. And remember, it's not about being perfect, but allowing the Lord Jesus to lead you both in life and in worship. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. Will you help us spread the word by giving us a high rating and dropping a comment to share the love? This recording is a Worship Team Training registered trademark and digital broadcast, all rights reserved, copyright 2025. Please subscribe to Worship Team Training. See you again on the next one.
Hey guys, thanks again for listening to this podcast and downloading this episode. I want to invite you to get our free Worship Team Training devotional. These are the writings I put out on Bible.com, YouVersion, and we've had thousands upon thousands of both English and Spanish that listen, they download them. So we invite you to do the same. Just head on over to worshipteamtraining.com/enews or find the newsletter link on the top right corner of the website, worshipteamtraining.com. Thanks so much, and see you on the next episode.